Boyfriend started recording our arguments, and at first he said it was just for clarity. Before we get into this, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy Reddit psychological horror stories. And comment what you would do in this situation because, honestly, I still don't know when I should have left. The first time he recorded me didn't even feel that weird. We were arguing in the kitchen about something stupid. Dishes, probably. Rent. One of those small fights couples have when they've been together too long. Then halfway through the argument, he picked up his phone and hit record. I remember laughing a little and going, "Are you serious?" And he just shrugged. You always say I twist your words. The weird part was how calm he sounded. Not angry, not dramatic, calm. If he had screamed at me or acted controlling immediately, I probably would have noticed the red flags faster. But Ethan always sounded reasonable. That's what made everything harder to explain. I told him recording me was weird. He said, "It's literally for both of us." Then he replayed part of the argument immediately, and honestly, I sounded worse than I remembered. Not abusive or anything, just sharper, more sarcastic. Hearing yourself in an argument is uncomfortable because suddenly you hear your actual tone instead of the version you imagined in your head. So eventually I rolled my eyes and let it go. That should have been the first red flag, not the recording itself, how quickly I got used to it. After that, he started recording almost every serious conversation. At first he'd ask permission, then eventually he stopped asking altogether. Sometimes I wouldn't notice until I saw his phone face down on the counter with the voice memo app still open. And every time I complained, he already had an answer ready. "You said I interrupt you. You said I don't listen. You said I remember things differently." He framed everything like he was trying to improve communication. Therapy language. Healthy relationship language. If you described it casually to another person, it almost sounded mature. That's why I stayed. But little things started changing after that. He'd randomly replay old arguments days later. Not entire fights, specific sentences. We'd be eating dinner and suddenly he'd go, "No, that's not what you said." Then he'd pull out his phone and actually play the audio. And hearing your own voice unexpectedly does something to your brain, especially during normal moments. Suddenly, the apartment stopped feeling private. Every conversation started feeling permanent. One night, I asked if he still had all the recordings. He laughed. Probably. Probably. Like there were too many to count. After that, I started noticing tiny things. Him adjusting his phone during conversations, leaving its screen down on tables, sliding it halfway under couch cushions, keeping his hoodie pocket facing toward me. And slowly, I started thinking before every sentence. Not because I was hiding something. Because I kept imagining hearing it replayed later. That changes the way you talk around someone. You stop speaking naturally. You start editing yourself in real time. Then one night, we got into a fight about my coworker, Daniel. Nothing serious. Ethan thought Daniel flirted with me. I told him he was paranoid. Normal relationship argument. But halfway through it, Ethan suddenly quoted me perfectly. Word for word. Something I had said during a completely unrelated argument almost 3 months earlier. Not approximately. Exactly. Pauses included. I remember just staring at him because normal people don't remember conversations like that. Then he smiled a little and said, "You did say that." And he pulled out his phone. That's when I saw the folders. Hundreds of recordings. Dated. Organized. Hours and hours of audio. I physically felt cold looking at them because suddenly this stopped feeling casual. This wasn't memory anymore. It was documentation. Archives. Like he was building a profile on me. I asked him why he kept all of them. And he genuinely looked confused by the question. In case we need them. Need them for what? He couldn't answer clearly. Just vague stuff about truth and accountability and remembering things correctly. That night I barely slept. Not because I thought he'd hurt me. Because I started wondering how many normal moments had been recorded too. The next morning I tested something. While he was in the shower, I casually said out loud, "I think we should break up." No reaction. Water still running. Then quietly, almost under my breath, I said, "Are you recording right now?" The shower turned off immediately. Immediately. Not 5 seconds later. Not after movement. Instantly. And for the first time in our relationship, I felt genuinely afraid of him. Not physically, psychologically. Like I suddenly realized I was living with somebody who was constantly observing me, tracking me, cataloging me. When he came out of the bathroom, he acted completely normal. Too normal. That fake relaxed voice people use when they're trying very hard not to reveal something. Then he asked, "Why would I record you when I'm in the shower?" I said nothing. But later that day, while he was at work, I searched the apartment. Not dramatically. I wasn't tearing open walls or checking vents. I was just looking. Drawers, shelves, desk cabinets. Then, I found the hard drive. Black external drive in the back of his desk drawer. No label. I almost didn't plug it in. Honestly, I wish I hadn't. Because once you see something, you can't really convince yourself you imagined it afterward. There were hundreds of audio files. Not dozens. Hundreds. Arguments, phone calls, conversations while we cooked dinner, conversations while we watched TV. Some recordings were over 5 hours long. And the file names weren't dates. They were categories. Lying. Defensive. Projection. Inconsistency. I clicked one randomly. And it was me crying in the car after my grandmother's funeral. A conversation I didn't even know he had recorded. Chapter 2. I stopped the recording after maybe 15 seconds because I physically couldn't listen to the rest. Not because I was embarrassed. Because I had absolutely no memory of him recording that conversation. It was from the day of my grandmother's funeral. I remembered crying in the car because I didn't want to break down in front of my family. Ethan came outside a few minutes later and sat with me while I calmed down. At the time, it felt supportive. Now I was hearing it through a hidden recording. I kept scrolling through the folders after that, and the deeper I looked, the worse it got. There were categories for everything. Deflection. Manipulation. Contradictions. Some recordings even had little notes attached to them. Voice changes when cornered. Avoids eye contact during this topic. More honest when tired. I remember reading that last one 3 or 4 times because it genuinely disturbed me. More honest when tired. Who analyzes their partner like that? Then, I found recordings from times we weren't even arguing. One file was labeled 2:14 a.m. I clicked it. At first, all I heard was sheets moving and quiet breathing. Then I heard my own voice. I was asleep. Talking in my sleep. I paused it immediately. For some reason, that disturbed me more than the argument recordings did. Arguments at least involved both of us being awake. This was different. He had intentionally recorded me while I was unconscious. And the file was over an hour long. That's when I realized the recordings got more frequent after every major point in our relationship. After moving in together, after meeting each other's parents, after talking about marriage. The more serious things became, the more he recorded. Then I noticed another folder. This one was called Evidence. I already felt sick opening it. Inside were short clips, not full recordings. Edited pieces from longer conversations. Completely out of context. I lied. You're right. I was texting him. I don't know if I love you sometimes. I remembered every single conversation immediately because none of those sentences originally meant what they sounded like. The I lied clip was from a surprise birthday conversation. I was texting him, referred to my brother. But isolated like that, they sounded awful. Like confessions. Like proof. That's when something in my brain shifted. Suddenly, every argument from the last year started feeling different. Every time Ethan corrected my memory. Every time he calmly pulled up details from old fights. Every time he said, "That's not what happened." He wasn't remembering better than me. He had archives. And I didn't. Then, I heard the apartment door unlock. My entire body froze. Ethan wasn't supposed to be home for another 2 hours. I shoved the hard drive back into the drawer so fast I almost dropped it. Then I sat on the couch pretending to scroll TikTok while trying to breathe normally. When Ethan walked into the living room, the first thing he did was glance toward his desk. Quickly. Almost automatically. Checking. Then he smiled at me. "You're home early." So was he. But I just nodded. The rest of the night felt completely different after that. I started noticing every device in the apartment. His phone charging on the kitchen counter, his Apple Watch on his wrist, his iPad beside the couch, his laptop sitting half open on the desk. Every microphone suddenly felt visible. At dinner, he casually brought up something I had said to my sister on the phone earlier that day. A private conversation while he was supposedly at work. I immediately looked up and asked, "How did you know that?" And for maybe half a second, he looked confused. Tiny reaction. Tiny mistake. Then he shrugged. "You mentioned it before." I knew I hadn't. But instead of arguing, I just watched him for the rest of the night. And once I started paying attention, I noticed something terrifying. Ethan almost never forgot anything I said. Not important things. Tiny things. Random comments from months ago. Small stories I barely remembered telling him. Exact wording from conversations that should have faded naturally over time. But they never faded for him. Because he wasn't remembering them. Naturally. He was replaying them. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. because I heard my own voice coming from the living room. Quiet. Muffled. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I realized Ethan wasn't in bed. I walked down the hallway and saw him sitting alone on the couch in the dark with his phone in his hand. Listening to one of our old arguments. Just listening to it. Like music. He didn't notice me at first, and hearing your own voice echoing through a dark apartment at 3 in the morning is one of the most unsettling things I've ever experienced, especially because it wasn't yelling. It was me crying, and he was calmly replaying it over and over. Then he noticed me standing there. He paused the recording and smiled a little, like he'd been caught doing something embarrassing. Then he said, I was trying to understand where things changed. Not where we changed. Where things changed. Like our relationship was some kind of experiment he was studying afterward. The next morning, I bought a pack of cheap AirTags and hid one inside his car. I know that sounds crazy. But by then, I needed proof that something was wrong because everything Ethan did existed just barely inside the line of normal. He records arguments. Okay, weird. He remembers conversations too well. Still explainable. He listens to old fights in the dark. Disturbing, but technically harmless. That's what trapped me there so long. Nothing by itself sounded insane enough. 3 days later, while Ethan was in the shower, his iPad lit up beside me on the couch. I wasn't even trying to snoop. I just looked over automatically when the notification appeared. Folder updated. Potential breakup indicators. And underneath it, my name. Chapter 3. I stared at the notification for maybe 2 full seconds before grabbing the iPad. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The folder was inside some notes app I'd never seen before. Password protected at first, but the screen was already unlocked from the notification preview. And honestly, I think part of Ethan wanted me to eventually find this stuff. That's what started bothering me the most. Nothing was hidden carefully. Just carefully enough. Inside the folder were screenshots, timestamps, audio clips, and pages of notes about me. Not normal relationship stuff either. It read like behavioral analysis. More emotionally reactive after work. Less confrontational when physically tired. Pulls away during direct questioning. Likely to minimize when uncomfortable. I felt sick reading it because it didn't sound like a boyfriend describing his girlfriend. It sounded clinical. Detached. Like he was studying me instead of loving me. Then I found a section labeled Escalation Patterns. Underneath it were summaries of our arguments. Not emotional summaries. Structured ones. Trigger. Response. Deflection. Resolution. Like case studies. One entry immediately stood out because I remembered the fight perfectly. Argument regarding coworker jealousy. Subject initially denied attraction. Increased defensiveness when timeline inconsistencies introduced. Subject. Not she. Not my name. Subject. I suddenly realized Ethan almost never used emotional language in these notes. No, I felt hurt. No, this upset me. Everything was written like observations from somebody outside the relationship. Then I opened another folder. This one was called Predictions. That's the one that really scared me. Because some of them were accurate. Terrifyingly accurate. Will likely attempt privacy recovery after noticing increased recordings. Will eventually search office area. Possible breakup discussion within next 30 to 45 days. The timestamps were old too, weeks old. Which meant Ethan expected me to find the hard drive before I actually did. And somehow that made me feel trapped. Like every reaction I had was already anticipated. Then I heard the shower water turn off. I locked the iPad immediately and put it back exactly where it was. My heart was pounding so hard I genuinely thought he'd hear it. Ethan walked into the living room drying his hair with a towel and smiled when he saw me. Normal smile. Normal voice. You okay? And I remember realizing in that moment how dangerous calm people can be. Not physically dangerous. Mentally. Because nothing about him looked wrong. Nothing sounded wrong. If I showed anybody those notes, he could probably explain them away as journaling or therapy exercises or communication tracking. And honestly, part of me still wanted to believe that explanation. That night I barely spoke. Ethan noticed immediately. He always noticed immediately. At one point while we were watching Netflix, he muted the TV and asked, "Are you upset with me?" The way he asked it felt rehearsed. Careful. Like he was testing phrasing. I said no too quickly. Then he tilted his head slightly and said, "That sounded dishonest." That sentence irritated me more than it should have. Not because he was wrong. Because suddenly it felt like every emotion had become measurable to him. Observable. Like I wasn't his girlfriend anymore. I was data. The next few days got worse because once you start noticing manipulation, you can't stop seeing it. Ethan started bringing up old conversations constantly. Not emotionally. Strategically. If I hesitated during an argument, he'd immediately reference a recording from months earlier. If my wording changed slightly, he'd point it out. You used different phrasing last time. Normal people don't talk like that. At least not constantly. And eventually, I realized something even more disturbing. I had started changing too. I was choosing words carefully before speaking, rehearsing sentences in my head, avoiding certain topics completely because I knew they'd become future evidence somehow. I felt monitored all the time. Then one night I got home from work and Ethan was already sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. No TV on, no food cooking. Just sitting there quietly with his phone face down beside him. That immediately put me on edge. He asked, "How was work?" Normal question. But then he followed it with, "Did Daniel work late too?" And the way he said Daniel's name made my stomach tighten immediately. I asked why he cared. He shrugged. "You talk about him a lot." I didn't. At least I didn't think I did. Then Ethan unlocked his phone and actually checked something. Not dramatically. Casually. Like confirming information. And he said, 7 times this week. I just stared at him. Then he looked up and calmly added, "Including twice yesterday." I remember feeling this weird mix of anger and fear because who tracks that? Who counts how many times their partner mentions another person? I asked if he was seriously keeping statistics on me now. And instead of denying it, he said, "You'd be surprised what patterns people ignore." That sentence genuinely unsettled me. Because he sounded proud of it. Like he believed he understood human behavior better than everyone else. The fight after that escalated fast. Not screaming. That's the thing people don't understand about Ethan. He almost never raised his voice. He stayed calm while I got emotional, which automatically made me look irrational. And suddenly I understood why he recorded arguments in the first place. The recordings always favored him. Because calm sounds truthful, even when it isn't. At one point I finally snapped and asked, "Do you even hear yourself?" And he quietly replied, "Do you?" Then he picked up his phone. And the second I saw him unlock it, something in me broke. I immediately stopped talking. Mid-sentence. Complete silence. Because I knew he was recording again. Ethan noticed instantly. And for the first time in our relationship, he smiled in a way that genuinely scared me. Not angry. Not aggressive. Satisfied. Like he'd just proven something. Then very calmly he said, "See, this is exactly what I mean." I didn't answer. I just grabbed my keys and left the apartment. And while I was sitting in my car trying to calm down, my phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. Just one sentence. "I think you should listen to how different your voice sounds around other men." Chapter 4. I read the text 3 times before realizing what he actually meant. Then my stomach dropped. Because suddenly I remembered the phone call with my sister. The conversations he somehow knew about. The way he always referenced things he shouldn't have heard. I immediately opened my car Bluetooth settings and started checking connected devices like that was somehow going to explain everything. Nothing looked strange. But once the idea enters your head that somebody might be listening to you, every piece of technology starts feeling hostile. I drove around for almost an hour before going back home because I genuinely didn't know what to do anymore. Part of me wanted to leave permanently. Another part still thought maybe I was overreacting. That's the problem with psychological manipulation. Nothing feels serious enough until suddenly it does. When I got back, Ethan was acting completely normal again. Sitting on the couch, watching TV, barely even looked up when I walked in. No argument waiting. No confrontation. Honestly, that almost made it worse. I asked him what the text meant. He muted the TV and looked confused for a second. "What text?" "Already lying." I showed him the message. Then he shrugged. "You sound different around him." Him obviously meant Daniel. I asked how he would even know that. And this part still freaks me out because Ethan smiled before answering. Not a nervous smile. A patient one. Like he was waiting for me to catch up. Then he said, "You leave your laptop open a lot." I just stared at him. And he casually continued, "Your microphone activates during meetings sometimes." At first, I didn't even understand what he was implying. Then I did. And my entire body went cold. Because I worked remote 3 days a week, my laptop sat open in the apartment constantly. I asked if he was listening to my work calls. And he immediately got defensive. Not guilty defensive. Offended defensive. "I wasn't on you." Then, after like 5 seconds, he added, "You were talking about the apartment." Our apartment. Like that somehow justified it. We argued for almost an hour after that. Or honestly, maybe argued isn't the right word because Ethan barely reacted emotionally at all. He just sat there calmly explaining why everything he did made logical sense. That was always his thing. Logic, frameworks, patterns. He spoke like somebody trying to win a debate instead of somebody trying to save a relationship. At one point I asked him directly, "Do you think this is normal?" And he answered immediately, "No relationship is honest without documentation. Yo, documentation. Not trust, not communication. Documentation." Then he actually said something that made my skin crawl. If people knew how often memory changes, recording would be standard. The scary part was how convinced he sounded. Not manipulative. Not evil. Certain. Like he genuinely believed he was the rational one. Eventually, I just stopped responding because I realized something horrible. Every emotional reaction I gave him became useful. The more upset I got, the calmer he became. And the calmer he became, the more irrational I sounded. I started noticing him watching me during silences too. Not angrily. Studying me. Waiting for reactions. Almost like he was mentally categorizing them in real time. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Ethan fell asleep beside me normally while I just stared at the ceiling, replaying everything from the last year. Then, around 2:30 a.m., I quietly got out of bed and checked his office again. I wasn't even looking for the recordings anymore. I was looking for proof that I wasn't crazy. That's different. I opened drawers, checked shelves, went through old notebooks. Then, I found a second hard drive taped underneath the desk. Smaller. Hidden better. And immediately I knew this one was different. I plugged it into my laptop in the living room while Ethan slept down the hall. At first, nothing opened. Then one folder appeared. Observations. Inside were videos. Not screen recordings. Actual videos. Most were short clips from inside the apartment. Me cooking. Me sleeping on the couch. Me sitting at my desk working. Some were clearly filmed secretly. Phone camera peeking from another room. Tiny gaps through partially open doors. My chest actually tightened while watching them because there's something deeply violating about realizing ordinary private moments were being archived without your knowledge. Then I found one labeled bathroom. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I just sat there staring at the file name while my brain tried to catch up with reality. And that's when I heard movement behind me. I turned around so fast I almost knocked the laptop off the couch. Ethan was standing in the hallway, completely silent, just watching me. I immediately closed the laptop, but it was too late. He already knew. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Ethan looked at the hard drive and sighed. Not angry. Disappointed. Like I'd invaded his privacy somehow. Then he quietly said, "You weren't supposed to find that yet." Yet. That word hit me harder than anything else. Not ever. Yet. Like this whole thing had stages. Like he already knew exactly where our relationship was heading. I asked him what the hell was wrong with him. And for the first time since I'd known him, Ethan actually looked emotional. Not guilty. Hurt. He said, "I was trying to protect us." Us. I remember laughing after he said that because I genuinely didn't know how else to react anymore. Protect us from what? From cheating? From lying? From forgetting conversations? Normal people don't secretly record their partner sleeping because they're scared of bad communication. Then Ethan said something I still think about constantly. Very quietly. Almost embarrassed. "I needed to know who you really are when you weren't performing." That sentence scared me more than the videos did. Because it meant he thought the real version of me only existed when I didn't know I was being watched. And once somebody starts believing that, there's no limit to what they'll justify doing. Chapter 5. I didn't sleep at all after that conversation. Ethan eventually went back to bed like nothing had happened. But I stayed on the couch staring at the black screen of my laptop trying to process what I'd just seen. The videos kept replaying in my head. Me cooking. Me sleeping. Me existing in private moments I didn't even know were being observed. And the worst part was realizing how long it had probably been happening. Weeks. Months. Maybe longer. Around 5 a.m., I finally opened my phone and texted my friend Maya. "Can I stay with you for a few days?" I didn't explain why. I didn't even trust myself to explain it correctly anymore. Because Ethan had spent so long reframing reality that every thought in my head came with self-doubt attached to it. At 7 a.m., Ethan woke up and acted completely normal again. Made coffee. Asked if I wanted breakfast. Kissed my forehead like the night before hadn't happened. That honestly scared me more than if he'd yelled. There's something deeply unsettling about somebody acting loving immediately after violating you. I told him I needed some space. He nodded immediately. Too easily. No problem. No arguing. No begging me to stay. No emotional reaction at all. Then he added, "I actually think that's a healthy decision." Healthy decision. Again, with the therapy language. At that point, I genuinely didn't know whether he was manipulating me consciously or if this was just how his brain worked. I packed a bag while he sat at the kitchen table working on his laptop. And the entire time I could feel him watching me without looking directly at me. Like he was tracking patterns, movements, timelines. Before leaving, I finally asked him something that had been bothering me for days. How many recordings are there? He thought about it for a second. Actually thought about it. Then said, I'm not sure anymore. That answer made my skin crawl. Because it sounded honest. At Maya's apartment, I finally told somebody everything. The recordings, the notes, the hidden videos, the folders, all of it. And halfway through explaining, I noticed Maya's expression changing. Not disbelief. Concern. Real concern. Then she asked, wait, did he ever tell you he was recording? I said sometimes. And saying that out loud made me realize how insane the entire situation sounded. Sometimes. Like, there were levels of consent. Maya immediately told me I shouldn't go back there alone. She said it instantly. No hesitation. And hearing somebody react normally to the situation finally broke something in my brain because until then, Ethan had successfully made everything feel debatable, complex, misunderstood. But hearing another person immediately say, no, that's not okay, made me realize how badly my sense of normal had shifted. That night, Ethan texted me. I think some distance could help us communicate more objectively. Objectively. Even his breakup text sounded clinical. I ignored it. Then another text came an hour later. I respect your need for space. Then, I'd appreciate if you didn't involve too many outside perspectives before we talk. That one bothered me immediately. Outside perspectives. Like other people were contamination. Like reality only worked correctly when it stayed between us. Over the next 2 days, Ethan kept texting me long paragraphs analyzing our relationship. Not emotional messages. Reports. Observations. Things like, we reinforce negative cycles when discussions become emotionally escalated. Or, you tend to seek external validation during periods of relational instability. Who texts like that during a breakup? Then on the third night, Maya asked me something I hadn't considered. Did he ever record other people too? I immediately said no, then stopped. Because honestly, I didn't know. And suddenly I remembered all the dinner parties at our apartment, friends sitting in the living room, conversations around the kitchen table, Ethan always leaving his phone nearby. I opened my messages with him and started scrolling upward looking for anything strange. That's when I noticed something I somehow missed before. Voice memos. Dozens of them. Randomly sent during arguments over the past year. At the time, I assumed he sent them impulsively. Proof during fights. But now I realize something worse. Every single voice memo only included my voice. Never his. I clicked one. It was from 8 months earlier. Me crying in the bathroom saying, I feel like you analyze everything I do. I didn't even remember saying it. Then Ethan's voice quietly spoke in the background. Very calm. Can you explain what you mean by that? Not comforting. Not emotional. Prompting. Like an interviewer. I stopped the audio halfway through because I suddenly realized something terrifying. Ethan wasn't just recording reactions. Sometimes he was creating them. Guiding conversations toward emotional responses so he could document them afterward. And once that thought entered my head, every serious conversation we'd ever had started feeling contaminated. Then my phone buzzed again. Text from Ethan. One sentence. I don't think Maya likes me very much. I immediately sat upright. Because I had never told him where I was staying. Chapter 6. I didn't move for a few seconds after reading the message. My first thought was simple and stupid. He's guessing. My second thought was worse. He's not guessing. I showed Maya the text immediately. Her face changed the second she read it. Did you tell him you're here? She asked. No, I said. But even hearing my own voice made it sound less certain than I wanted. We checked everything. My phone location was off. No shared apps, no social media check-ins, nothing obvious. Maya even checked her router logs like that would somehow explain it. Then she said something quietly. Or he heard you. That line stuck. Because suddenly, I remembered all the possibilities I had been trying to ignore. The voice memos, the laptop microphone, the recordings I never agreed to in the first place. But this felt different. More direct. Like he wasn't just documenting anymore. He was responding. That night I barely slept. Every notification made my body tense. Every sound in the apartment made me think of him sitting somewhere quietly analyzing it. Around 2:40 a.m., my phone lit up again. Ethan. Not a text this time. A voice message. I hesitated before pressing play. At first, just breathing. Then his voice, calm as always. I'm not trying to make you feel trapped. Pause. I just think you're reacting to incomplete information. Another pause. You always do that. No anger. No urgency. Just certainty. Like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. Then the message ended. Maya told me to block him. I didn't. Not because I wanted to talk to him. Because blocking him felt like pretending he didn't exist. And by that point, I wasn't sure that was safe either. The next morning, I went back to the apartment. I didn't tell Maya. I just needed to see it with my own eyes when he wasn't there. The place looked normal. Too normal. That's what bothered me. Coffee cup still on the counter. His laptop closed. The couch slightly indented like someone had just stood up from it. I walked slowly through each room checking for anything new. Then I noticed something small. My toothbrush was moved. Not replaced. Just rotated slightly in the cup. That tiny detail hit harder than anything else because it meant someone had been there recently enough to care about orientation. I opened the bedroom. Everything looked untouched at first. Then I saw it. My phone charger cable was neatly coiled on the bedside table. I never coil it. Ethan does. I stepped back immediately. Then I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. Unknown number, but I already knew. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there in the middle of the bedroom listening to the silence of the apartment that didn't feel empty anymore. Finally, I opened the message. It was a photo. Me. Standing in the bedroom. Taken from the doorway. Timestamp 3 minutes ago. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down on the bed. Then a second message came in. I didn't want you to feel like you had to sneak in. No threat? No anger. Just observation. Like he was narrating my behavior in real time. I ran out of the apartment without grabbing anything. Outside, I called Maya immediately. She told me not to go back. Not ever. But the problem was already bigger than that. Because now, it wasn't just about recordings. It was presence. That night, I stayed with Maya again and kept my phone off for most of it. When I finally turned it back on, there were 12 new messages. Not all from Ethan. Some were old. Replayed. Resent. Like he was organizing the timeline of our conversations for me. One message stood out. You always come back when you realize you're missing context. I didn't respond. But I couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was predicting me. The next day, Maya got a call from an unknown number. She answered on speaker. Silence for a few seconds. Then Ethan's voice. Calm. Polite. I just want to make sure she's okay. Maya didn't respond. Then he added, she tends to misunderstand tone over text. And that's when I realized something that made my hands go cold. He wasn't trying to reach me. He was adjusting the narrative around me. And I had no idea how many people were already hearing it. Chapter 7. After that phone call, Maya didn't even look at me the same way for a second. Not distrust. Not judgment. Just awareness. Like she suddenly understood that this wasn't only between me and Ethan anymore. It was expanding. That night she insisted I stay awake with her. Lights on, phones charged, everything visible. It felt paranoid until it didn't. Because around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. But the message wasn't for me this time. It was for Maya. Tell her I'm not trying to control her. Maya didn't answer. Then another message came immediately after. I just wanted to stop making decisions based on incomplete assumptions. I felt my stomach twist because he wasn't even pretending anymore. He was actively shaping the conversation outside of me now. Maya finally said, this is stalking. She said it like a fact, not an opinion. And hearing it stated so plainly made everything I'd been rationalizing collapse at once. I think that was the moment I stopped defending him in my head. The next morning we went to the police. I expected it to be simple. It wasn't. The officer listened, took notes, nodded slowly, then asked questions that made everything feel smaller than it was. Did he threaten you? Did he break into your apartment physically? Do you have proof of surveillance devices? And every answer I gave sounded weaker out loud than it did in my head. Recordings. Notes. Messages. Behavioral tracking. But no obvious single crime that fit neatly into a report. That's the part nobody tells you. When something is wrong in a complicated way, it becomes harder to prove it's wrong at all. We left without action being taken. And I remember walking out of the station thinking, he knows this will happen. That thought didn't come from fear. It came from pattern recognition. Because Ethan never did things randomly. Everything had timing. Everything had anticipation. That night, I got a final message from him. Not long. Not clinical. Just one line. You're going to come back when you realize nobody else has the full picture. I didn't reply. But I felt something shift after reading it. Not fear anymore. Clarity. Because for the first time, I stopped thinking about what he knew and started thinking about what he needed to know. The next day, I went back to the apartment with Maya. Not to stay. To collect everything. We kept it quick, in and out, grab what mattered, leave immediately. But the moment we stepped inside, I knew something was off. The apartment felt reset. Not empty. Prepared. Like someone had already accounted for our return. The couch cushions were aligned too perfectly. The kitchen counter completely cleared. Even the air felt different, like it had been aired out for inspection. Maya whispered, "This feels staged." I didn't answer. Because I saw the laptop. Open. On the table. Screen on. No password prompt. Just a single folder visible on the desktop. Named, "If she comes back alone." My blood went cold immediately. Maya said, "We're leaving." But I couldn't move. Because underneath the folder name was a file preview. A video thumbnail. Dated today. With my name in it. And before I could even process it, the apartment door clicked shut behind us. Locked. From the outside. Not slammed. Not forced. Just closed. Like someone had been waiting for that exact moment. Then a voice came from the hallway speaker. Calm. Close. "Ethan. I didn't want it to be like this." And for the first time in the entire story, his voice wasn't explaining anything. It was final. Maya grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the kitchen window, but I was still looking at the laptop. The screen changed. The video started playing automatically. And I saw myself. Standing in that exact apartment. Already recorded. Already inside the timeline he had prepared. Like no matter what we did next, he had already accounted for it.